The Scream Kings are in no way responsible for any encounters with the paranormal, extraterrestrial abductions, eldritch insanity, hauntings, curses, hexes, demonic possessions, cryptozoological sightings, or any loss of sleep that may result from listening to this podcast.
This is the Scream Kings podcast. I'm Nathaniel Darkish.
And I'm Max George. Are you ready to meet Peachfuzz, the friendly wolf? Yay, Peachfuzz!
Yeah, let's do the Peachfuzz dance there.
No, hard pass. I have to welcome our special first guest. Everyone meet Lindsay Starke, House of Starke.
Yes. Hello.
She has graciously offered to be our guest this 8th episode, and we are very excited to have her.
Very excited to be here.
Yeah, you have the honor of being our very first guest ever, so pretty cool stuff.
I have to say, nothing makes me feel more official as a podcast as actually having a guest, so thank you, Lindsay.
I do what I can to support the spookies, so.
Support the spooky, I like that. We need to make that a hashtag.
I do like that. It's catchy.
Yeah, we'll use that hashtag when we upload this episode.
I love it. Before we get going into this 8th amazing podcast, we do have to apologize to all our wonderful listeners out there because we've kind of hit some bumps on our podcast journey, and those bumps are called annual subscription fees for damn podcast hosting.
Yeah, it's kind of killed things, and yeah, our last host, as we mentioned in our previous episode, kind of ran out of free space, so yeah, we're getting that all figured out. We should be hopefully back in the game very, very soon. Once this goes up, we'll be back in the game, so there's that.
Yes, so please expect much more content from us. We've found an excellent hosting site that will allow us to upload, hopefully unlimitedly, so we shouldn't keep running into this issue. And maybe if all you listeners would just donate to us, we wouldn't have these problems, but you don't, so that's on you.
Yeah. But, we really haven't found a way to facilitate that, so maybe on us.
No. I want free money.
Just slip free money out of the door.
Yes, just scream, I want to give you money into the void, and we'll know and somehow accept it. Well, before we spiral too far off, let's maybe let our guest introduce herself a little bit. Or I guess maybe you could just talk about why she's on the podcast, since who knew her first, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working at a pharmaceutical research company for about 6 months now, and all of my wonderful coworkers are awesome and great, but Lindsay in particular had a cubicle filled with awesome anime stuff and horror stuff and all these wonderful, wonderful spooky things. And so I was like, hey, do you like horror movies? And she was like, yeah, I do. And then 4 hours later, we had a great conversation about every horror movie that we've ever seen.
My favorite part was going through Netflix and saying the ones that we liked and didn't like.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite work moment up to this point.
Which I have watched some of those movies now, so thank you.
And I have watched some of yours that you gave to me.
Good.
So just a wonderful horror relationship budded out of nowhere. And I told her that I had a podcast, and she's even listened to a few of our episodes, which is awesome. She doesn't hate us, so that's even better. And it's just been really great to have someone who you work with who enjoys something as much as you do. Typically you don't find horror fanatics just out and about walking around downtown Salt Lake, so it's nice.
We're a rare breed, I find.
Yes, and when people say that they are horror fans, I feel like a lot of times they don't really understand. Like they like The Ring or The Sixth Sense, or they've seen The Exorcist once growing up. But they're not true horror fans.
Yeah, and then I get the weird looks when I tell people one of my goals in life is to watch every scary movie ever made. So
that is a wonderful goal.
then the conversation usually goes a different route.
I could definitely relate to that. I write horror as well, and so when I say, "Hey, I'm a horror writer," people are, "But you're happy and not like, dressed in all black and hiding in the corner."
I've been there as well, Nathaniel. I'm a very cheery person, so when people find out that like I watch a horror movie once a day, they're like, "What? You do?"
Hey, you all have to have your things,
It's true. Let's kill those stereotypes.
Yeah.
And I mean, we are finding our people with this podcast and this wonderful guest. So hey, let's dig in. So I guess just if you want to maybe just share, how you got into the horror genre, that would be awesome. Just that way our audience can learn a little bit about you.
And
Yeah.
Lindsay, I'd also love to hear about, I know you had a podcast in the past, you've got panels at Comic-Con, like give us a broader picture of what you do and kind of the nerd fandom community out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, I'd say in general, I'm just a big fan of anything taboo, I guess. I collect weird oddities and articulated skeletons. I love horror. I'm, of course, one of those weirdos that loves all the true crime podcasts and Serial and all of that. And I love anime, so let's get weird there too. And that's the podcast that I did with my siblings, and the panels at Comic-Con, we do anime reviews, which of course my favorite anime are scary anime also, because the Japanese are crazy.
Do you have a favorite anime just off the top of your head that you can think of?
An amazing scary anime is one called Another. It's, like I said, the Japanese are just crazy, and so
I feel like their censor is a lot less regulated than the American.
Oh yeah,
And it's just a very different cultural bent, which I like.
oh yeah, I think they shy away from some things, but violence is not one of them. So yeah, I would check that one out. It's great, especially if you love horror and want to dive into some anime. But yeah, I think I got mostly hooked on horror because growing up, we owned one scary movie on VHS, and that was Poltergeist. And it was always the thing to never watch that movie because it'll give you nightmares. And so it was like that forbidden fruit that finally one day I was able to go watch Poltergeist on VHS, and from then on I was just hooked. I loved just the creepiness of it. I loved the story. I don't know, it was like my gateway drug into scary movies. And yeah, since then I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole. Just like I said, I'm not an academic in the field, but I am definitely a super fan. So yeah, I'd say that's the pivotal way that I got into horror. And then yeah, I just digest a lot of it.
Well, and along the lines of digesting a lot of it, what is your favorite horror movie, or a couple of your all top picks?
So cool, of course, Poltergeist again. Just your first is always your favorite, I would think. But then I love The Shining. I think that script and that movie is just incredibly scary, as well as being a beautiful film. I love Silence of the Lambs, which I loved your guys' podcast, or your episode on it.
Woohoo!
Because I love it. Yes. I'd say a more recent one, recent-ish, I love Let the Right One In. I think it's the best, I guess, vampire film that's come out in a really, really long time. Yeah, and I guess I can just kind of go from there. I have so many, but those are the big ones.
Nathaniel, you've seen Let the Right One In, haven't you?
I've actually only seen the American remake. It's like at the very top of my list to watch. So
Okay, I haven't seen it, but I've heard nothing but good stuff about it, so I'll have to check it out.
Oh, it's fantastic, and it's scary, and it's just everything I would want in a horror film. So definitely check it out.
Awesome. So what would you say your favorite scariest horror movies? You know, there's a difference between good horror and scary horror.
So I feel so jaded now because I've watched so many. It takes a lot to scare me at this point.
We've had that exact same conversation multiple times.
Yeah, I don't like. It's hard to say. Maybe I'm a little desensitized. So if something really scares me, that's a A+ movie. I'd say I don't know why it hit me so bad or really freaked me out, but the first Sinister
Ooh,
did
that's
not.
Nathaniel didn't like that one either.
Yeah, it was too real and weird, like sleeping with a light on at night after I watched that movie.
I can see that.
Yeah, that one got me.
yeah, there's a definite sense of wrongness that kind of pervaded after watching it.
Yeah, just nope. I'm good seeing that one once.
The second one is terrible, so.
Yeah, again, sequels, or
Yeah.
like I talked about before, but yeah, horror sequels have a hard time, and I have to agree that one didn't really scare me as much. But
All right. Well, I guess speaking of horror sequels, so today we're actually going to cover two movies, Creep and Creep 2, both directed by Patrick Bryce and written and directed, and written by both Patrick Bryce and Mark Duplass, and they were also the stars of the first film. So, yeah, we're going to talk both movies today and kind of get into what worked, what didn't work, and then also, yeah, kind of talk about what makes horror sequels successful and why are so many of them so terrible. So, I guess, Max, do you want to kick us off just on a brief summary of the first film?
Yeah. So something that I really think is fascinating with the Creep movies is it's incredibly simple. You know, there are not a lot of people in the movies. The first one you see two people. Patrick Bryce and Mark Duplass. Patrick Bryce plays Aaron. Mark Duplass plays a guy named Joseph. And kind of the summary of the movie itself is Patrick Bryce's character, Aaron, is responding to like a Craigslist ad or something of the sort about a guy Joseph, who tells people that he has cancer. And so he has this loving wife and this son on the way, and he wants to create kind of this bibliography documentary for his unborn son, so that if he does pass away from the cancer, his son will kind of have this video to remember him by, so to say. And so Aaron arrives at the house, and Joseph's actually not there. And he's like, well, what the hell's going on, kind of a thing. And then all of a sudden, Joseph's there out of the blue. And from that moment on, things just kind of start going downhill. And it's a really great movie because it kind of makes you feel sympathetic for this Joseph character. But at the same time, he's just kind of really odd and really creepy, for lack of a better word. And as the movie progresses on, you just completely realize that this guy is a psychopath, a serial killer, stalker kind of a person, but you can't stop it. And that's one of the best things I think about the movie. Do you want to go, Nathaniel, or even Lindsay, into a few of the things that Joseph does that kind of really get under your skin and creep you out?
Well, there's Peachfuzz.
Peachfuzz!
what? I love Peachfuzz. That would not be creepy at all.
Not at all.
So I guess to clarify for those who haven't seen it, and you really should just pause the episode and go watch them. They're both on Netflix.
And again, we're gonna throw spoilers out left and right. So if you don't want to be spoiled, get out of the way.
Yeah, but so Peachfuzz is the name of this character that he at first claims was a character that his dad created, and it's this like creepy kind of furry-esque wolf mask that he has like this like happy dance for Peachfuzz, the friendly wolf, and that's just one of the things that just is unnerving. And then as the film progresses, Joseph then says, "Oh, I lied earlier about Peachfuzz being a thing that my dad did. It's actually, I got that mask, and but my sex life was in the toilet with my wife, and so I actually just went and bought that mask, and to mix things up, I just, basically like raped my wife, and with wearing that mask, and suddenly our sex life was great after that." So both, unsettling to say the least.
Well, and I think an aspect of what makes him so creepy is that he shares such personal information, with this guy. I mean, if I was with someone, even that I knew a little bit, and that started coming out, like, all right, I gotta get something from the car, and I would be out of there. So I think that adds to the creep factor.
And even really before that sex story with Peachfuzz, Mark Duplass's character really gets under your skin, not because of these like super intense scary moments, but he had like one of the very first video scenes that Aaron does is Mark Duplass's character Joseph strips naked and gets in the tub and has tubby time. And he says it was something that his father used to do to him, and so he wants to pass it on to his kid. And the whole time you're just like scrunched up like, this is so awkward and creepy. Get out of there, Aaron. Get out of there. And then it kind of develops into this relationship that they start with, Joseph telling these intimate details of his life and wanting to know like the most embarrassing moment of Aaron's life, and this exchange that's just so uncomfortable, and you can feel it watching this movie, and then all of a sudden just it loses control and it's crazy.
Yeah, so basically he doesn't let Aaron leave that evening. He says, "Oh, well, thanks for, the job. I'll, send the DVD over in a couple of days. Like, everything should be good." And he's like, "No, like stay and drink with me." And he's like, "No, I have a long drive back." But, he basically forces him to drink with him, and then like ends up chasing him around the house. And, has hidden his keys and it just is not letting him leave, which is disconcerting to say the least. And then from there, when Aaron finally does successfully leave, then we have some parts film where he is, at his own home. Joseph keeps leaving like presents or mailing him things, like a little like stuffed wolf doll that when cut open has a locket with their pictures in it. All sorts of fun, unnerving things, just, and a video of him apologizing for freaking him out, and just keeps getting weirder and weirder.
And it kind of builds to the moment where Joseph's character sends him this tape, and it's just completely apologetic of, oh my gosh, I got all of these mental issues that I've been dealing with all my life, and I really feel bad for all the crazy things I did, and I appreciate your friendship and everything you've done for me, and kind of sticking around even though I've done all these terrible, horrible, psychotic things to you. Will you please meet me at the park? And then, never meet anyone at the park who sends you anything like that.
No. Good rule of thumb.
Good rule of thumb. I mean, I would have been out with tubby time. I see that. I'm out. Peace and out.
He drops trow and then you're gone.
Exactly. Exactly. Lindsay, was there anything to the plot that you wanted to add that we may have kind of missed there?
I mean, one thing that I did find super, well, I guess not creepy, but I like how they played it out was when he was trying to leave that night, and he like drugs him with Benadryl or something to try and find the keys that he had hidden, and he gets the phone call or he picks up the phone call that was supposedly from the wife, but it was really Joseph's sister, and she's like, "Oh my God, you need to get out of there." And I love that scene because then it's like, okay, you felt bad for the guy. They went on these hikes, they did all this stuff. He stuck around, just out of more of a sympathetic, need to. And then it's like, boom, horror movie starts. This guy's crazy. You got to get out of the house. So props to them for putting that in. I think it was a good turning point for me.
Yeah, and just to kind of build off of that, I like how that scene kind of makes you question everything. Is that rape story still true or not? Did he rape his sister, or is it just, is this, I don't know, just there's so many questions that you start immediately going through and realizing kind of layer upon layer, is this all a fabrication? How much is the truth? And it really just sets everything, for me, it just made everything so confusing and disorienting in a very terrifying way.
It was one of those kind of classic horror movie oh shit moments where you kind of are like, oh my gosh, this is what happening. Those characters have those revelations. And I really think one of my favorite parts about this entire movie was the acting that these two gentlemen did, because it was so convincing and it was so uncomfortable and really terrifying in its own right, without devil eyes or demons possessing or blood and gore. It was just this interaction between these two that was really, really scary.
Yeah, and just real, which makes it so scary. It's something you could place yourself into, as opposed to crazy or horror, which again, kind of more psychological horror in a way.
Real, I like that description. This is something that could actually happen, and we read about creepier and scarier things that happen. That family out in California who imprisoned all of their kids with shackles. This kind of stuff happens, and that's the real horror that they really were able to portray quite well, I thought.
And one cool thing I found out about that too, again, keeping it in there, they kept this really inexpensive. The woman on the phone that he's talking to is actually Mark Duplass's wife, so...
That's amazing.
Yeah, but, don't spend the budget on actors.
Yes, budget. That's a whole nother horror conversation that we could have.
Yes.
Let's kind of pick apart the movie a little bit more and kind of talk about our favorite parts, scariest parts, and maybe least favorite part, or part we would want to fix or change a little bit.
I guess maybe before we do that, should we just say how it ends? Because we kind of led up to the him meeting him in the park, but not actually what he does to him in the park.
That's true. Yeah, go ahead, Nathaniel. Spoil it for everybody.
Well, I mean, we're going to talk about the sequel too, so it's probably relevant to say the least. So basically, Aaron goes into the park. He's just sitting and waiting, and then you see. And this is all just being filmed, from behind, from a little bit of a distance away, and then you see Peachfuzz, Joseph in the Peachfuzz mask, and a big trench coat slowly approaching, and then he pulls out an axe and just hits him right in the head, and then it ends, and then it, kind of zooms out to, him, Joseph watching this tape and saying Aaron, I love you. You'll always be my favorite. And then he puts the tape with, probably 30 other tapes of presumably other victims.
Oh, it's terrifying, that scene.
But it's such a good ending, and it really does set it up for a sequel in its own way. But I love that ending. Well, that sounds really strange. I love that he got chopped in the head, but
you're with your people, Lindsay.
I know, but it was a good ending. I could have had it at that, but to add into the end that he's, an actual serial killer, I think was a good addition.
And a good serial killer at that, being able to kind of incorporate these personalities and do it 30 times without getting caught. That's pretty impressive.
Okay, so I guess now back to just other things that we liked about it. Who wants to go first?
Let's do favorite parts probably first. if we're all in agreement.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. Your silence means agreement to me, so I'm going to go for it. My favorite part is probably... I don't know, there's a lot of favorite parts. I'm thinking more scarier moments, and they're kind of blurring together, so I will take my 2 scariest parts and put one of them as my favorite parts. How about that? You know, as much as I hate it, the little tubby time scene really, I think, set the precedence for the movie, that it was just this creepy, raw, uncomfortable, just bizarre moment. I mean, it happens within the first 15 minutes of the movie, and you're just like, what the hell is going on? What am I watching? And just the acting between the 2 characters, I thought it was really, really well executed and really kind of set the tone for the rest of the movie, that this is going to be a creepy movie. We're going to be uncomfortable for, the next hour or so.
Probably my very favorite part was just a single little moment. It's just when Aaron is running, through the house, just trying to get away from...
You're taking my scariest part, Nathaniel. I hate
Maybe. I don't know. Just kind of running away from Joseph after the whole drugging and drinking and all of that stuff that happened, and he just runs over to a door, and there is Joseph wearing the Peachfuzz mask, and he rubs his butt up against the door in a almost strangely seductive way, I guess, and just makes very inhuman noises, and just that scene got to me in both a terrifying way and also just a wow, that really just drove home the intensity of the scene. So
well, and at that point he knows he's in trouble too, so it's just super anxiety and strangeness. I kind of forgot about that. That's a good one.
What was your favorite?
Again, that's hard. I really like the whole movie. I like really the whole middle where Aaron's, he gets the DVD with Joseph just lugging what looks like a bag full of body parts and digging a hole.
This was great.
Yeah, and just him getting the wolf and finding the locket, and I know that to me is the scariest part, because he knows he's out there, he knows where he lives, and he's getting all of this stuff. Is just the idea of terror to me. So I'd say that to me is the scariest.
And also just the fact that he calls the cops, and the cops basically don't do anything.
I know. Exactly. I mean, what a feeling of kind of helplessness, and kind of a juxtaposition, because you don't hear a lot about male stalkers, stalking men. It's not something you see a lot. So, yeah, I would not want to be Aaron at that point.
So good. So I guess is there a least favorite part of the movie that maybe something that just didn't work for you as well? Do you want to go first, Lindsay, or?
Yeah. I don't know how the whole rape thing of his wife with the Peachfuzz, really, I feel like that was a little forced, I guess, and kind of extreme, and I guess I can see it in a manner of making you feel unsettled and kind of showing you more in depth as to how off he is. But I don't know, it just seemed like it was a little bit too drawn out and just didn't add a lot to the movie.
And see, for me, I was a little confused because it almost really didn't feel like rape. It kind of came across that she subtly knew what was going on, and I don't know, I didn't, my rape alert didn't go off when he was kind of telling that story. It more was kind of this bestial sex scene, and I agree, it was kind of frivolous and kind of weird. I don't know. I agree. For me, one of my least favorite parts was actually what we just kind of talked about, was that police. It just didn't feel real. It kind of felt like that horror movie trope of, we tried to call the authorities and they can't do anything. You know, in a real life setting, I think that the police would have done something, would have come and looked at the information and kind of investigated a little bit. I don't know. I kind of felt like that was a missed opportunity to kind of make the movie a little bit more realistic in their approach of there's this crazy person who's doing stuff and giving me presents and whatnot, and something needs to be done.
Yeah, but again, that could kind of play into, like I said, the fact that a male stalking a male is rarer, I guess.
Yeah, and when you said that, that kind of put a different spin on that point, because that makes complete sense. You know, you never really hear about a male stalker stalking another male. You know, that's just not really a thing that you hear about. And that point really kind of was like, oh, okay, I kind of get that. Yeah. This is why we have you on, Lindsay.
Oh, thank you.
Should we go into the screams and the crowns for this lovely movie? Something that we are trying to follow up with on this podcast?
All right. So Screams, again, it's just, how scary the movie is. I gave it a 7 out of 10.
I gave it an 8.
And I gave it a 6.
And I feel like, and so the average there is 7. And, it's definitely scary, but I'd say it's almost more unsettling than scary in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I'd say that's a good average for my experience with the film. So,
yeah, I think 7 kind of portrays the overall film in its best as far as its scare factor goes.
All right, crowns. Do you want to go first, Max?
I gave it a 9. I thought it was very well produced. I thought the acting was incredible. I thought, for the most part, the script was even really well written. I loved how low budget it was. I loved how there were only 2 actors in it. It's one of my favorite scary movies, honestly. It's a good movie to tell people if they're looking to find a horror movie. I think it does a really good job at kind of introducing someone into the horror genre, and I know that it's going to be a good movie that really anyone will enjoy, I think.
Yeah, I also gave it a 9. It really resonated well with me. It's one of the better examples of found footage, which is a genre that I also just have I probably love that genre or subgenre a little bit more than I ought to. But but this is definitely one of the best examples of that, being done so well with so minuscule of a budget, and just I am really impressed with the film.
Yeah, and I gave it a 7. I think I'm a harsh rater. I loved it as well, though. I am in love with Mark Duplass. I think he's amazing. This was really my first exposure to him. And, I thought Aaron did good to be kind of the Patrick playing Aaron, the just kind of bland person put into this very strange situation. But at the same time, I think his acting was a little boring at times. But again, maybe that's just a part of the character. But yeah, I agree. It's one of the better found footage films out there. And it could be a really good gateway horror film for the newbies.
Awesome. So that puts our average at 8.3 crowns. I don't know how that would physically look, having a 0.3 of a crown, but hey, there we go. So let's launch into Creep 2 now.
Creep 2. Yeah, I just have a lot of feelings about this movie. I'm sorry.
Lindsay, I know that I think probably of the 3 of us, you're the one who really enjoyed it the most. So, would you like to take the lead on just giving us a plot summary?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Creep 2, sequel to Creep 1. Imagine that.
Wait, what?
I know. Getting very clever here. But you have Aaron, who was Joseph. So that's one thing that I loved about Creep 2 is basically Joseph took on the name of Aaron, who he killed in the first film, which again raises this whole thing of, does he do this every time? It makes you want to go back to that last scene and look at all of the movie cases to see if there's a Joseph in there that, he had changed his name to before. But anyway, I thought that was very clever, good thing to add and bring from the first film.
For the sake of clarity, can we keep his name Joseph? just so that we're not
How about
confusing
just
people
Peach
listening.
Fuzz?
Peachfuzz works. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually the alternate title for the original film, so why not?
It's true.
I love it. That'll be the next name for one of my chickens. I own a lot of chickens. Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah. So, the movie starts out with just cold-hearted murder. He's a serial killer. It's what he does. And kind of leads into the fact that he is such a successful serial killer that he's getting bored with what he's doing. And if he's getting bored, then he doesn't really have a purpose. So he hires a videographer to come and kind of do his autobiography of his life.
And the videographer specifically is trying to do like YouTube videos, just kind of like talking to, or just kind of like exploring unusual people, like their lives and just kind of encounters with those people. I mean, who could be more interesting than a guy claiming to be a serial killer?
Exactly. And yeah, so her name's Sarah. She goes up, of course, again into a cabin in the woods where she meets Joseph, Aaron. And basically the rest of the movie is just Joseph being very blatant that he's a serial killer and he's bored of being a serial killer and he wants to, leave the world his story and then, as any good story, kill himself in the end. So, and many strange things ensue in this day of filming.
And I think it's worth noting that Sarah does not believe him.
Yes, even when he shows her the video of him killing Aaron, it's still that, you as the viewer know that he's a serial killer, but, she puts herself into all these strange environments all the time. She's still very skeptical, and I think that's why throughout the film she kind of is able to stay on his weirdness level and just play along with what she thinks is just, his weird story.
So I guess, yeah, lots of interesting events ensue, and then basically he decides that she has kind of reignited the spark of his love for serial killing, and so he tries to kill her, but she fights back, and she successfully survives his attack, and you see her sneak up on him with a shovel, and she hits him with it, and then takes off, and then the movie cuts to her on a subway being filmed, presumably by him.
Which, again, like they did with the first Creep, leaving it open to a sequel. Creep 3.
Which they are planning, actually, that they want the Creep to be a trilogy, so the third one's actually in production right now.
Oh, that's fantastic news.
So, hopefully I like it more than I liked this one.
I'm amazed you don't like it that much.
I thought the first one was just really tight, and it was very well thought of, and I kind of felt the second one, it was all over the place, I don't know. I thought the acting was great, and I thought the story was there. I just kind of felt like they were ping-ponging in three different directions, with Peachfuzz's character, Joseph, wanting to be kind of rejuvenated in his serial killing, to he wanted her to kill him, to then him again trying to kill her. I kind of felt like it was all over.
Yeah, I did feel like I had a harder time following the emotional arc of the story. So hard to know if he was actually like being real or not. But this time it was almost like frustrating in a way as a viewer, because I just didn't feel like I had a real clear idea of if he was ever telling the truth, about wanting for it to be over or not, and I think having a clear idea of if that was sincere, that that he really did get interested in serial killing again midway through the movie, or is this all just him playing her the whole time? I don't know. I just like the fact that I felt like so many things were unanswered for me as a viewer, just didn't really connect with me as much.
Yeah, no, I guess that's why I liked it, because to me, and why I think it's a successful sequel, is that Creep 1 was kind of the seeing what he does and, what his modus operandi is. And then Creep 2 is going into, why he is the way that he is. And I think it's really clever to have a story of a serial killer who gets bored. That's something I haven't seen before. And so I think it's interesting to see how him... Honestly, I think if Sarah's character, if she had not been as interesting and, like I said, kind of on his weirdness level, he probably would have just killed her as well and then just moved on. But the fact that she could kind of meet him, meet him with his weirdness is what kind of moved it along, and why it was kind of all over the place. I can see what you guys mean, though, by it. It was a little more discombobulated. It wasn't as formulaic, I guess, as the first one was. But maybe that's what adds to the anxiety of it when you're watching it. And again, I love Sarah's character.
I can get behind that. I think that's a good point, that this serial killer, it was almost like a look inside his brain through the cinematography, that he was just so all over the place that it was kind of coming through with what he was doing with Sarah. I think Sarah kind of was dumb, and she had a lot of flags that she could have gotten out, and she just kind of kept wanting to push it and push it and push it for the sake of her video or whatever. Out of her and Aaron, I think Aaron was the much smarter of the two victims of.
And yet,
but
Sarah's
he's the one who died. Yeah.
I know. What does that mean? Dumb people live better? Whatever. But no, Lindsay, I think you brought up a really interesting point about the second one, that I think I'm now going to have to rewatch it and kind of look at it more of the lens of what's going on in his mind at that time than really just a movie as itself. I think that's a nice layer that you just developed.
Yeah, and I think you see that, like, especially with the really bizarre hot tub scene, where, like, I think he was really confused with how he was going to move forward, and it just comes out in how bizarre some of that stuff is.
So, should we go into favorite parts, scariest parts, least favorite parts, stuff like that?
Okay.
For me, I think the scariest, no, not the scariest. Yep, the scariest. Scariest part was right at the beginning, where Sarah first meets Joseph / Aaron / Peachfuzz / whatever the hell his real name is. It could be like Bob. And she agrees to kind of be his experiment. And he's like, okay, in order to begin, we have to kind of break down every wall that there is. And he just goes and gets naked. And usually when you see nudity in movies, it's breasts or female anatomy. But this movie just balls to the wall, quite literally. You see all of Joseph / Aaron / Peachfuzz. And it's not just this little glimpse of nudity. It's that creepiness, this uncomfortable scene of nudity where he's just full buck naked in front of the camera, and you just have to deal with it. And then you get another layer, and poor little Sarah completely disrobes and standing in front of the camera for a good 2 to 3 minutes, and you don't know what to do or say or think. I think it really was creepy and intense, and I loved it.
And I thought that was actually a really cool choice with how that scene played out, in that you do see Peachfuzz in all of his glory, but when Sarah strips down, he actually he's then holding the camera, and he actually zooms in on her face, so you don't actually see her body. You know that she's naked, but like that's not the point of that of the scene. It wasn't to have to see her nude. It was that she had to bare herself to him and expose herself to him. It was not about that being captured on film.
How about you, Lindsay? Your favorite part?
Favorite part? Well, okay, I gotta throw it out there. I love the weird, mushy, like, horror, comedy, romance thing. So, of course, I love when they kiss. I'm a girl. It just is what it is. But that isn't my favorite part. I really liked the scene where, he's bringing her out to show her what he got her, and it's a grave. And I love, and again, I think it's just so clever to connect it to the first movie. He gives her the locket, but he didn't even take Aaron's picture out of it. And so so he's given her a locket with his face and some random dude he murdered. Again,
I thought
just
that was the scariest moment as well. Just this like deliverance of, oh, this is a antique, not an antique, a relic of the last person I killed, and now it's yours.
Exactly. And now we get to go, kill each other in the woods. So I'd say that was my favorite part. I thought it was filmed really well. For being so low budget to film like that in the woods is very, very difficult. So, no, I really liked that part.
My very favorite part was around the middle of the film where he's trying to convince her, no, like I like literally do want you to kill me, and he like lays down on the table and tries to get her to, if I remember, chop his head off with the hatchet, or the, I guess, axe from the first film, and she won't do it, and then he goes up on the upstairs and he's like, okay, like how about this? Instead of you actively killing me, how about you just don't save me? And then he puts a noose around his neck and just jumps off the side, and just like he just does it. I loved how intense that scene was because she didn't believe he was going to do it, and he just totally. I mean, that was kind of the scene where she started to recognize that things weren't quite as fabricated.
It was a real encounter.
Yeah, everything isn't as fabricated as she had believed up until that point. And then he claimed afterwards, oh, I'm so sorry, no, I didn't actually, like, I couldn't have actually died, like, I had a, thing protecting me or whatever, but, that's nonsense. But I just really liked how much that really kind of made things more real for her, and kind of was her first, like, real oh crap moment.
Yeah, and then at that point, it really is her choice to stay. She knows this is legit, but like any artist, she's suffering for her art, for her video, and so she makes that decision.
Let's talk least favorite parts. For me, I mean, like I've mentioned, I kind of felt like this movie was a little disjointed. Like there were 3 subplots going on at the same time that I wish that they could have pulled together a little bit more cohesively like they did the first. However, Lindsay, now that you've kind of explained, why you like kind of that disjointedness, I can get behind that was poetic in a way that it was kind of a glimpse into the psyche of this serial killer who, in a way had multiple personality syndrome, you could say, or, whatever. But I'm sticking to my guns and saying that's probably my least favorite.
My least favorite part was probably just the very lengthy scene where he wanted to like stand in a river to symbolically be like giving his a monologue in the river, and it's
yeah, I forgot about that part.
But it isn't high enough, so he has to just like awkwardly like sit in this little creek bed and trying to present this information. Like, I think that scene was mostly intended to be humorous in a lot of ways, but it was just, to me, it was just such a long scene that it kind of just went beyond what worked for me as a viewer, and I started getting bored, honestly.
Yeah, I have to agree that would probably be my least favorite part as well. I don't think it added anything to the story. And I mean, they did the whole wilderness hike and all that in the first movie. I don't think it was necessary to do again. So I have to agree that's a fast forward moment for me.
All right, should we go into our screams and our crowns for Creep 2?
Sure. So I gave it 6 screams. It was still pretty scary for me, but definitely lost a little bit of the intensity that the first film had.
I would agree. I gave it a 6 as well. I think it still maintained, a good sense of uncomfortability. Is that a word?
Uncomfortableness.
Yeah, sure. English major, Nathaniel. But I felt like it was lacking something that first one really honed in on.
And I feel kind of bad doing this. Again, I'm a harsh rater, and it takes a lot to scare me. And so I did give this a 4, but truly I don't think it's supposed to be scary. I think it really is more of a psychological thriller? No, not even thriller. Just a psychological movie. When she does have her face all taped up and jumps out of the dark, I did get a jump out of that. So I will give it that. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a scary movie in a classical sense, but definitely gives you the heebie-jeebies.
Okay, so that puts our average at 5.3. Now let's move on to crowns. I gave the movie a 7. I don't dislike it as much as Max did by any means. As a whole, like my viewing experience was generally quite positive. Like I like it, but I don't love it like I love the first one.
I gave it a 5. I thought it was still a really great movie. But again, I wanted more from it. And that may have been my expectations. I was anticipating a lot more where I loved the first one so much. But yeah, I don't know. I wasn't super fond of this movie as much as I was the first.
I gave this one a 7. I liked it more than the first. I'm sorry,
Well,
Max.
you rated the first one a 7 too. So do you really?
Again, I'm harsh though because I've seen a lot of these movies, but I did like it better. The thing that really gives it high marks in my book is that to me it is a successful sequel to a found footage horror movie, because I feel like that is almost impossible. So it just automatic marks just for that one thing.
I can get behind that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I definitely, even though I do have certain qualms with the film, it worked better as a horror sequel than almost any other horror sequel I've seen, with a, very small handful of exceptions. And so, I mean, yeah, I felt like the fact that they pulled off making this fresh and interesting was very impressive. I really hope that they can make the third one fresh as well in some way, and the fact that they're doing it as a trilogy, gives me some hope, but we'll have to see how well that pans out. So
let's talk about horror sequels, and why do you guys think that they don't work most of the time?
I think a lot of it is because much of what makes a horror movie scary is the fear of the unknown, and that's usually kind of gone in a sequel. We already know what to expect almost, in every instance.
And that's why I think this one does well, because surely if it was another creep where it was just him following a new guy and kind of going through the same formula that the first one did, I don't think it would have been as interesting as where he's put himself in this whole new environment.
So, do you guys have other horror movie sequels that you appreciate or enjoy or think did a better job?
Yes. What immediately comes to mind is, for the Nightmare on Elm Street series, my very favorite is the third film, Dream Warriors. I felt like it took the original premise and ran with it in a more interesting way. I also really enjoyed New Nightmare. I felt like that film also, in a lot of ways, was more successful for me. than the original film. Now, the rest of the sequels are kind of garbage in many ways, but those ones really stand out to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they stayed decent until New Nightmare, and then they just went wild.
Yeah. Or I mean, even like number 4, I thought was just atrocious. So I mean, it's hard.
Yeah, I mean it's the same thing with the Friday the 13th. There's only so many ways you can bring him back.
Mm-hmm.
One of my kind of sequels that kind of comes to mind is the Conjuring movies. I loved Conjuring 1. I thought it was terrifying when I first saw it. I really loved what they did with kind of the demon and possession and all of that. And then they brought the second one into it, and it was terrifying. It was great. It was just, they were both really solid movies. But I think those two worked really well because it was different stories on their own. It wasn't a continuation of part 1.
And it wasn't just the same thing over again.
Right, yeah. I mean, different scares and kind of how... What's the demon's name? Oh, Valak in the second movie was using another ghost as kind of a scapegoat and a front. And I don't know. I thought they were both great movies, but again, they were kind of two different movies.
And if you're just a spooky story fan, it's a good retelling of those stories, but of course more Hollywood, but I think it didn't go campy.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't do campy very well. Campy and B movies, I have a hard time with, Max.
Yeah, and I think also something that's often a problem in a lot of sequels is just that, like, once it's an established franchise, they know that people are just going to keep coming back to it regardless. For some reason, a lot of horror fans are drawn to bad sequels like A Moth to a Flame. So, they just get sloppier with their budgets a lot of times. And yeah, it's hard to make a successful sequel when you're working on even less money than the minuscule budget of the original in many cases.
And I think a lot of times less is more. When you look at the Evil Dead series, the first Evil Dead was made on a nothing budget, but it was still terrifying. You look at Blair Witch Project, it's one of the most successful horror, found footage horror films there is, and again made on a nothing budget. But then when you go to Blair Witch 2, it's a just garbage pile of a movie. And I think it's because they, like you said, they had the established franchise. They had the notoriety from the first one, but in that case they had more of a budget, so they just threw in as much as they could, and it just made it not scary.
Yeah, it did definitely lose a lot of its intensity.
And I think it's poignant to bring up that Nathaniel and I, when we went to FearCon, we kind of sat at this terrible, terrible, terrible panel about these people who were very adamant that a budget, if any horror movie has a budget, then it's going to be a terrible horror movie. And I don't think that's the case. I think there are, what's the word I'm looking for? Strings kind of attached that it can go awry with the budget, but at the same time, you can also do a lot more as far as special effects go and scares, and I think The Conjuring is a good example of that. It did have a very good budget, especially for the second movie, and they still were able to produce a good, solid movie.
That's because James Wan actually knows how to make a movie.
Okay, valid point.
Oh yeah, that's a little extreme to say, because again, I do think a lot of the best horror movies.
This panel, Lindsay, you would have been like shriveling in your seat. I was very uncomfortable, but I stayed the entire panel, as Nathaniel can attest.
We were mostly just muttering angrily in the back, but yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's like any thing you're into. There's anime snobs that think one way, and the rest of anime is terrible. I think it's the same. Whereas I like to think I like a wide variety of horror. Because I do like B movies. I like camp, but I love it all. And yeah, I guess I don't mean to say that when movies have money they automatically go bad, but I think that can be a factor in a lot of them.
I agree.
Yeah, well, because I think in many cases they're replacing actual like sincerity and wanting to make a good movie with let's just throw money at it until it looks pretty.
Yeah.
Which doesn't work. Horror's always hard to find sequels of in general. I mean, even with books. I mean, Stephen King has a sequel to The Shining, but that's and then his Dark Tower series, but that's about it. I don't know. It's just I feel like so much of horror is very kind of scare your audience and then get out, and so it's hard to maintain that. But anyway, I think I don't know. I don't really have much more to say on the movies or even horror sequels unless do you guys have anything else you want to add?
I do not. I really enjoyed having you on, Lindsay. It's been kind of a breath of fresh air having a third opinion. Most of the time Nathaniel and I are pretty same when it comes to our feelings about horror movies. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having. I love talking about this stuff, so I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, we might have you on more.
Yeah, I think we should definitely have like a horror anime episode in the future, and we'll definitely have you back.
I just have to give a shout out to probably the sister podcast that has given us the most support and most encouragement, and that is Monsters Out of the Closet. They are a wonderful podcast, and the creators are out in the East Coast. It's a beautiful horror podcast that does a lot of different horror stories. The cool thing I like about them is they pull art from other horror fans and kind of recreate it for podcasts. And so they do music, they do poetry, they do short stories. It's a really fun podcast. You got to go listen to it. I am a voice actor for them, and I've premiered on their first episode. And again, they're Monsters Out of the Closet. It's a horror-themed podcast primarily focused at the LGBT community. And then the other podcast that I do is called Dysfunctional Parenting. It is a fun little podcast that I do with a friend about the struggles and challenges of being a parent living in a non-traditional type of a family. So definitely go check that one out too. That's my little plug for my small business ventures in the world of podcasting.
One other thank you, of course, to McCall Soucis of Red Panda Designs for our wonderful new logo. It's super awesome, and I absolutely love it.
And I claim the skull with the eyeball, if anyone is wondering. Lindsay, did you want to say anything to sum up about your chicken group on Facebook, about your panel at Comic-Con, or anything? We want to give you some networking as well while we're here.
Yeah, I guess if you are a horror fan who also raises backyard chickens, you will love my backyard chicken group on Facebook, Utah Backyard Chicken Enthusiasts. And if you love anime, check out Salt Lake City Anime. It is our anime book club.
Well, without any further ado, I have some gentlemen that I need to go stalk and kill. So I'm going to sign off.